The goddess you've been trying to serve has been lying to you the entire time. Queen Marika the Eternal, the divine ruler who supposedly built the Golden Order to bring peace and prosperity, who removed death from the world to create an age of plenty, who seemed invincible and perfect, personally took a hammer and shattered the Elden Ring with her own hands. The very source of her power, the foundation of reality itself, destroyed. The game tells you this happened because she went mad with grief after her son Godwyn was murdered. But I'm going to show you something almost no one notices. Nearly every major event in the Lands Between's history, from the moment Marika rose to power, to the Night of Black Knives, to the Shattering itself, follows a pattern. And when you see that pattern, you realize she wasn't mad at all. She was executing a plan that took centuries to unfold. Everything you thought you understood about Elden Ring, about gods and order and fate, is built on a foundation of deliberate deception. The Tarnished, the demigods, even the greater will itself, all playing roles in a conspiracy so elaborate that most of them didn't realize they were being used. And at the center of it all was Marika, a goddess who knew exactly what she was doing from the very beginning. Tonight, we're going to unravel this conspiracy from the cosmic origins of existence itself to the 6 different futures you can create. By the end, you'll understand why Marika did what she did, and you'll see this world in a completely different light. Because the real story of Elden Ring isn't about restoring a broken world, it's about whether you finish what Marika started. Settle in. This is going to take a while, and it's going to completely change how you see this game. But first, we need to go back to before there were gods, before there were rings, to understand what Marika was actually rebelling against. Part 1. Before the Golden Age. When unity became many. Long before the Erdtree, before Marika, before the concept of death even existed, there was the One Great. According to the teachings passed down by followers of the Frenzied Flame, this primordial state contained all existence as unified wholeness. No separation, no individual suffering, no distinction between self and other. Then came the Greater Will. This cosmic entity, dwelling in what's described as a lightless void beyond the stars, did something that the Frenzied Flame's followers call a mistake. It fractured the One Great. From unified existence came separation, individual lives, distinct souls, and with that distinction came something new to reality. The possibility of suffering. Where there had been only unity, now there could be loneliness, conflict, desire that could never be fully satisfied. The followers of the Frenzied Flame believe this fracturing was the original sin, that all pain traces back to this moment of division. They seek to burn everything away, to return existence to unity through yellow flame and madness. Whether they're right about the Greater Will making a mistake is impossible to know for certain, but what's clear is that this fracturing created the foundation for everything that followed. Having fractured existence, the Greater Will sent its vision of order to the Lands Between. First arrived a golden star carrying Meta, the Mother of Fingers. This being would serve as the Greater Will's communicator, holding a microcosm between her tail fingers that allowed her to receive messages from the cosmos, as described in items associated with Count Ymir's questline. From Meta came the 2 fingers, strange entities that would speak for the Greater Will, though their messages came as cryptic pulses of light requiring specialized finger readers to interpret. Then came a second golden star, and this one carried something far more significant. The Elden Beast. This wasn't just a messenger, it was order incarnate, the Greater Will's living vision for how reality should function, as stated in the remembrance of the Elden Beast. The Elden Beast would eventually become the Elden Ring itself, though calling it a ring is somewhat misleading. The Elden Ring was actually a complex arrangement of great runes, each representing a fundamental law of existence, as various item descriptions explain. These runes could be added, removed, or modified, allowing whoever controlled the ring to reshape reality itself. Want to remove death from the world? Extract that rune. Need to grant immortality? That's just another rune away. The Elden Ring wasn't discovered or found. It was the tool through which order could be imposed, maintained, or completely rewritten. But here's something crucial that won't become clear until much later. Count Ymir's dialogue in the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion reveals that Meta was abandoned by the Greater Will at some point. The connection was severed, yet the two fingers kept acting as though they still received divine guidance. Based on this, we can infer that much of what the Golden Order attributed to the Greater Will's active will might have actually been the two fingers improvising, acting on old instructions or their own interpretation of what their absent master would want. Keep that in mind. It becomes important when we talk about why Marika did what she did. Before the Greater Will's dominance, the lands between knew other powers, other visions of how reality should be structured. There was the Crucible, that primordial state where all life blended together. The Crucible Axe, it, and various aspects of the Crucible incantations describe this as a time when all life was part of one great primordial amalgamation. The horns on omens, the wings on misbegotten. These weren't originally mutations or curses, but natural expressions of the Crucible's chaotic life force. Ancient dragons ruled an age before the Erdtree, with Dragon Lord Placidusax serving as Elden Lord to a god whose name has been lost to time, as the remembrance of the Dragon Lord states. The fire giants worshipped their fell god in the mountain peaks, tending the flame of ruin described in the giant's red braid as being capable of burning even the Erdtree to ash. These weren't lesser powers waiting to be overthrown. They represented legitimate alternative orders, different frameworks for existence. The Greater Will's victory wasn't inevitable or peaceful. It came through systematic conquest, through wars that reshaped the land itself, through the elimination of any power that offered an alternative vision. And for this conquest, the Greater Will needed something it lacked. A face mortals could see, a voice they could hear, a god they could worship. It needed an Empyrean, a vessel who could bear the Elden Ring and rule in the Greater Will's name. That vessel would come from the Numen, an all-female race connected to the eternal cities deep underground, as the Black Knife armor describes. From a remote village of shamans, from a people whose suffering would be carefully erased from history, would rise the woman who would become Queen Marika the Eternal. And here's where the story gets interesting. Because Marika didn't just accept godhood and serve obediently. From the very beginning, evidence suggests she was planning something else entirely. Part 2. The Rise of Marika, or How a Victim Became a Tyrant. Here's what the Golden Order wants you to believe. Marika was chosen by the Greater Will, elevated to godhood, and built a glorious empire that brought peace and prosperity to the lands between. She was benevolent, eternal, perfect. Here's what the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion reveals. Marika came from the Shaman village, a settlement of Numen women who were systematically persecuted by the Horn Scent. The Golden Braid item and various Shaman village discoveries show that these people were used in horrific jar experiments, their bodies stuffed together in attempts to create some kind of unified being. The people of Marika's village weren't just killed. They were violated at the most fundamental level, their bodies desecrated, their very essence used as material for someone else's pursuit of power. Marika wasn't just chosen as an Empyrean. She was one of the few survivors of what could be called genocide. Now watch what she does with power. Watch how someone who experienced the worst oppression imaginable uses that experience not to create a gentler world, but to build an empire that mirrors the very cruelty inflicted upon her people. The pattern suggests that the abused became the abuser, the victim became the conqueror, and she did it so thoroughly that her own origins were nearly erased from history. When Marika rose to godhood, the Two Fingers granted her a shadow. Malekith, a beast man bound to her by fate, as described in Malekith's Black Blade item. Shadows served a specific purpose. They protected their Empyrean, yes, but they also acted as a fail-safe. If an Empyrean ever betrayed the Greater Will, their shadow would become their executioner, as Bled's questline demonstrates. Malekith was both Marika's greatest ally and the sword hanging eternally over her head, a constant reminder that her power came with conditions. The first major act of Marika's reign tells us everything about what she prioritized. She had the Rune of Death removed from the Elden Ring. The Mending Rune of the Death Prince description confirms this event as the beginning of the Golden Order. Before this removal, another Empyrean called the Gloam-Eyed Queen had wielded destined death as the god-slaying Black Flame, as the Black Flame ritual incantation explains. She led the Godskin Apostles in hunting and killing gods, proving that even divine beings could meet true endings. For the Greater Will's order to be secure, for Marika herself to be truly eternal, death had to be controlled, locked away, made into something that could be granted or withheld according to divine will rather than natural law. Malekith defeated the Gloam-Eyed Queen, as stated in the god-slaying Black Flame incantation, and sealed the Rune of Death within his own flesh, within his Black Blade. From that moment forward, he was known as Death of the Demigods, according to Malekith's armor set. True death was removed from the world. Immortality became the default state for Marika and her bloodline. Think about what this means. Every person in the lands between would die and have their soul return to the Erdtree, recycled endlessly, trapped in an eternal cycle with no escape. Meanwhile, Marika and her children would live forever, unchanging, untouched by time, permanently elevated above everyone else. To consolidate her power and spread the Golden Order through military might, Marika needed a champion. She found him in Hoarah-Lu, a brutal chieftain of such raw violence that he had a beast lord named Serosh grafted to his back just to contain his battle rage, as Serosh's remembrance tells us. Marika granted him grace and renamed him Godfrey, making him the first Elden Lord. The title Elden Lord is crucial to understand. It didn't mean co-ruler or equal partner. It meant consort, champion, the sword arm that would fight Marika's wars while she shaped the Order itself. Godfrey led armies of Crucible Knights, warriors who wielded that primordial chaotic power in service of the very Order that would eventually reject the Crucible as imperfect, as the Crucible Knight armor sets describe. The wars of conquest began. The bloodiest was the campaign against the fire giants in the northern mountains. The giants tended the flame of ruin, a fire so powerful it could reduce even the Erdtree to ash, as the flame of the fell god incantation confirms. This represented an existential threat to the Golden Order. The war was genocidal. Nearly every giant was slaughtered. Their civilization was destroyed. But Marika's revenge went further. As the fire, giant's remembrance reveals. She left one giant alive, cursed it to tend the very flame that had been its people's sacred charge, forced it to guard the flame for eternity so no one could use it against her. She transformed survival into torment, made immortality into punishment. Even the trolls, distant relatives of the giants, were forced to choose sides. Those who betrayed their kin and joined Marika were marked by having a hole carved into their abdomens, a permanent sign of their treachery visible on every troll in the game. They're living monuments to the price of opposing Marika's vision. The Golden Order spread through conquest, disguised as enlightenment. Ancient powers were subjugated. Anything that represented an alternative way of existence was systematically destroyed. And through it all, Marika built a theology that presented her rule as inevitable, natural, divinely ordained. From Marika and Godfrey's union came the Golden lineage. Firstborn was Godwyn, who would become known as Godwyn the Golden, as the Golden Epitaph sword describes him. He was everything the Golden Order claimed to represent: noble, powerful, radiant, beloved by all. Where his father represented martial conquest, Godwyn represented the ideal of peace achieved. He even befriended the ancient dragon Fortisax, as the dragon cult incantations reveal, bringing them into the Golden Order through diplomacy rather than force. But Marika and Godfrey also had twin sons, Morg and Morgott. These children were born as omens, their bodies covered in horns that marked them as touched by the crucible. Despite being children of the goddess herself, despite having divine blood, they were deemed abominations. According to Kenneth Haight's dialogue and various environmental storytelling, Marika had them locked in the subterranean shunning grounds beneath the capital, hidden away where no one would know the divine bloodline could produce something the Order considered imperfect. This is the hypocrisy at the Golden Order's heart. Marika, who came from an oppressed people, who knew what it meant to be deemed unworthy of life, built an empire that replicated that same oppression. The omens were cast out. The misbegotten were enslaved. The Albinorics, artificial beings created through alchemy, were hunted and rejected despite being products of Golden Order research, as Latenna's quest line reveals. The Golden Order preached transcendence, purity, perfection. But it achieved these ideals through exclusion, through declaring vast categories of life as unworthy, through hiding or destroying anything that didn't fit its narrow vision. The Order established two fundamental laws, as the Golden Order Principia prayer book explains. The law of regression stated that all things yearn to converge, to return to their origins. The law of causality stated that all things are connected in chains of cause and effect. Golden Order. Fundamentalists studied these laws like mathematics, seeking to understand the logical principles underlying reality itself. But even as the Golden Order reached its peak, cracks were forming. The Erdtree, supposedly eternal, released golden seeds to spawn minor Erdtrees, as the Golden Seed item notes. Why would something eternal need to prepare for succession? The seedbed curse description mentions that this revealed the Erdtree as not quite eternal, suggesting even the central pillar of the Order doubted its own permanence. And Marika herself began to change. Malena's dialogue recounts words spoken by Marika at the minor Erdtree church, where she declared her intention to search the depths of the Golden Order, to seek understanding rather than rely on blind faith. Her words show someone questioning the very system she built. Then came the most mysterious development in Marika's reign: the emergence of Radahn. This red-haired champion appeared to be a separate person, a warrior devoted to the Golden Order who fought in Marika's name, as various sword monuments describe. But the truth, revealed through the statue in Leyndell, that only changes when the law of regression is applied, is that Radahn and Marika were the same being. One entity with two aspects, two personalities, two approaches to godhood. The exact nature of this division remains ambiguous. Miriel's dialogue suggests they might have been split and then rejoined, but the timing is unclear. What's certain is that Radahn represented something distinct from Marika. Where she questioned, he remained faithful. Where she might have doubted, He believed absolutely in the Golden Order's rightness, as his attempt to repair the shattered ring later demonstrates. This division within divinity itself would become crucial, because when the Elden Ring was finally shattered, these two halves of one god would work against each other, unable to resolve their fundamental disagreement about whether the order they had built deserved to continue. Part 3. The Liurnian Wars and the Children Who Would Break the World. Radagon's emergence as a distinct champion, whether he was always separate or split from Marika at some point, gave the Golden Order a new tool for expansion. Where Godfrey represented overwhelming force, Radahn could be more subtle, more strategic. The Carian royal family ruled Liurnia of the Lakes from the Academy of Raya Lucaria, as Renala's remembrance describes. They were sorcerers who looked to the moon and stars rather than the Erdtree, following powers outside the Greater Will's domain. This represented both a challenge to the Golden Order's claim of universal authority and an opportunity for expansion. Marika sent Radahn to conquer Liurnia. Sword monuments throughout the region chronicle two Liurnian wars, where Radahn led golden warriors against the champions of the moon led by Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. The wars were brutal, with neither side able to claim decisive victory. The forces of the Erdtree and the forces of the moon fought to a stalemate. But then something unexpected happened. As the Carian inverted statue reveals, Radahn fell in love with Renala. The Sword of Night and Flame description notes that he performed a ritual at the Church of Vows using celestial dew, seeking absolution for his aggression and declaring his love. Renala, in turn, gifted him the Carian regal scepter's predecessor sword, passed down through generations of Carian queens to their consorts. They married, and through this union, Liurnia was brought into the Golden Order, not through conquest but through alliance. Whether this love was genuine, strategic, or part of Marika's plan from the beginning is left deliberately ambiguous. But the result was clear. The Academy and the Erdtree were united through marriage. From Radahn and Renala came 3 children, Radahn, Ricard, and Ranni. Each would become a demigod when Radahn was later elevated to Elden Lord, and each would play crucial roles in the events to come. Radahn, the eldest, inherited his father's red hair, though unlike Radahn, he viewed it as heroic rather than shameful, as the Radahn's lion armor describes. From childhood, as the Star Scourge heirloom reveals, he idolized Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, adopting lion imagery and aspiring to become a warrior of similar legendary status. Radahn grew to enormous size and studied gravitational sorcery in Celia, town of sorcery in Caelid, as the Remembrance of the Star Scourge explains. He learned these arts from an alabaster lord, using them to achieve something unprecedented. He held the very stars in place through sheer magical might. Geren's dialogue confirms that Radahn conquered the stars, preventing meteors from falling and cosmic bodies from moving. This conquest of the stars would have consequences no one could foresee. Ranni's dialogue reveals that her fate was bound to the stars, as was Miquella's based on Gideon Ofnir's dialogue. By holding the stars still, Radahn was unknowingly preventing certain destinies from unfolding. Whether he knew this, or acted simply out of a desire to protect the lands between from celestial threats, is never made clear. Ricard became Praetor Ricard, a high-ranking official in Leyndell's government, as Tanith's dialogue explains. He commanded inquisitors who hunted heretics in the Golden Order's name, though Tanith also reveals he harbored doubts about the Order even while serving it. This internal conflict would eventually lead him down a path so blasphemous that it would horrify even those who shared his opposition to the Erdtree. Ranni, the youngest and only daughter, was chosen by her own 2 fingers as an Empyrean, a potential successor to Marika, as her dialogue confirms. But Ranni saw this elevation not as an honor, but as a prison. As she explains to the player, Empyreans were puppets of the greater will, their paths predetermined, their autonomy an illusion enforced by the two fingers assigned to them. Ranni was brilliant, willful, and absolutely determined to escape this fate. She began studying the Dark Moon, as the Dark Moon Ring and Dark Moon Greatsword descriptions reveal, and plotting a way to kill her Empyrean body while preserving her soul. This would require obtaining a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, which should have been impossible given that death was sealed within his flesh, and he served as its eternal guardian. While Radahn built his life in Leonia, fathering these three extraordinary children, the situation in Leyndell was changing. Godfrey and his warriors had fulfilled their purpose. They had conquered everything. The wars were over. The entire lands between bowed to the Golden Order. And in that completion, according to the banished knight armor description, Godfrey became expendable. Marika stripped Godfrey and his warriors of their grace, the golden light that marked them as blessed by the Erdtree. Suddenly maidenless and graceless, they became tarnished, marked by shame. They were banished beyond the fog surrounding the lands between, exiled born to distant lands, to grow strong through hardship. The reasons for this exile have been endlessly debated by scholars within the game. Was it simple cruelty? Had Godfrey's purpose been exhausted? Or was this part of a longer plan? The Tarnished's ring description and Melena's recounting of Marika's words suggest that Marika intended for the Tarnished to return one day, when they were needed. This could imply she was already planning for a future where the Golden Order would need to be challenged from outside. With Godfrey exiled, Radahn was recalled to Leyndell. He abandoned Rennala, as the Amber Starlight description sadly notes, leaving her heart broken. The full moon crossbow description reveals that this abandonment eventually led to her being deposed by the Academy and imprisoned in the Grand Library. Radahn returned to the capital and became Marika's second Elden Lord, with his three children from Leonia elevated to full demigod status as Marika's stepchildren. But remember, Radahn and Marika were the same being. When Radahn became Elden Lord, Marika was essentially taking herself as consort, uniting her masculine and feminine aspects. The Marika's hammer description notes that she would later shatter the ring while Radahn tried to repair it, suggesting that although they are the same being, they have fundamentally different ideals. From this union of self with self came twin children, Miquella and Malenia. And these two would be born with curses that would shape much of what followed. Miquella, described as the elder twin by the Miquella's lily item, was born with eternal youth. He could never age, never grow beyond childhood, despite possessing adult intellect and powerful magical abilities, as Gideon's dialogue confirms. This curse prevented him from ever achieving full godhood on his own. Yet Miquella was beloved, possessed of a charisma so powerful it seemed almost supernatural. The Bewitching Branch description explicitly states that Miquella is loved by many people, and that he has learned very well how to compel such affection. The Shadow of the Erdtree expansion would later reveal this as something darker than simple charisma. Miquella possessed an ability to quite literally bewitch people, to compel their love and loyalty regardless of their own will. Malenia, Miquella's twin, was chosen by the outer god of Rot as its vessel from birth, as the Blue Dancer charm and her remembrance explain. This affliction slowly consumed her body from within. The Valkyrie's prosthesis and other items show that by adulthood, the Rot had claimed her sight, legs, and arm. She required prosthetics to fight. Yet despite these limitations, she would become perhaps the most fearsome warrior in all the lands between. According to Millicent's questline dialogue, Malenia swore herself as Miquella's blade, his protector, the sword he could never wield himself. The twins were inseparable, devoted to each other absolutely. Miquella dedicated himself to finding cures for both their curses. He studied Golden Order fundamentalism, creating incantations like the Triple Rings of Light as gifts for Radahn, as that incantation's description states. But when fundamentalism failed to help them, as Unalloyed Gold Needle's description notes, Miquella abandoned it and began developing something new. Unalloyed gold, a pure substance that could resist the influence of outer gods. From this material, he crafted needles that could suppress Malenia's rot temporarily, as Gowry's dialogue confirms. These needles could even subdue the frenzied flame, as using Miquella's needle in Dragonlord Placidusax's arena demonstrates. But they were temporary solutions, suppressions rather than cures. The stage was set for catastrophe. Multiple forces were moving in shadows. Ranni plotted her escape from the Two Fingers' control. Miquella desperately sought solutions to curses the Golden Order couldn't fix. Marika herself seemed to be questioning everything she'd built, based on her words at various churches. Morgott remained hidden in the shunning grounds despite his absolute loyalty to the order that imprisoned him. Morg had found the Formless Mother, an outer god of blood, and dreamed of his own dynasty. And then came the Night of Black Knives, the conspiracy that would shatter the Golden Age forever. But here's something to consider before we get to that night. Based on the Black Knife Armor's description stating the assassins were rumored to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself, and considering the complexity of what unfolded, is it possible that two conspiracies were actually running simultaneously? That Ranni orchestrated one plan while Marika executed another, with both using the same assassins for different purposes, neither fully understanding what the other intended? Keep that question in mind, because the Night of Black Knives is far stranger than it first appears. Part 4. The Night of Black Knives. Two conspiracies disguised as one. On a bitter night, shrouded in winter fog, as the Golden Order's sword monument states, the first recorded death of a demigod occurred. Godwyn the Golden, most beloved of Marika's children, was assassinated by Black Knife assassins wielding daggers imbued with the rune of death. This event would become known as the Night of Black Knives, and its consequences would echo through every corner of the lands between. Here's the official story, according to Rogier and other sources. Someone stole a fragment of the rune of death from Malekith. The Black Knife assassins, described by their armor as all women who were rumored to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself, had their daggers imbued with this stolen death through a fearsome ritual. They infiltrated Leyndell and murdered Godwyn, carving the curse mark of death into his flesh. Ranni eventually admits to the player that she orchestrated this. According to her dialogue, she stole the fragment and used it to forge the god-slaying black knives through ritual. But notice what she doesn't say. She never explicitly states she hired the assassins or chose Godwyn as the target. She says, "I did it all," but the details remain deliberately vague. Meanwhile, at the exact same moment Godwyn died in Leyndell, Ranni was atop a tower in Liurnia, plunging a blade into her own Empyrean body. The curse mark of death description explains what happened. The mark should have taken the shape of a circle. But 2 demigods perished at the same time, breaking the curse mark into 2 half-wheels. Godwyn's soul died while his body lived on. Ranni's body died while her soul survived, transferring into a doll modeled after her mentor, as her dialogue reveals. Neither death was complete. Both were transformations. But here's where things get interesting. The Black Knife assassins were Numen with close ties to Marika. Ranni orchestrated the theft and ritual, yet Godwyn was Marika's most beloved son, the pride of the Golden Order. If Marika wasn't involved, wouldn't she have prevented this? If she was involved, Why allow her favorite child to be the victim? One interpretation, supported by several item descriptions and environmental clues, is that two separate conspiracies were running simultaneously. Ranni needed someone else to die at the exact moment she did, to split the curse mark and prevent either death from being complete. She needed a demigod, someone important enough that their death would involve the full power of the stolen death fragment. Marika, based on her growing doubts and her later actions, may have been planning to strike at the Golden Order itself. The Hugh dialogue about creating a weapon to kill a god, and his mention of this being his promise to Queen Marika, suggests she was preparing for eventual rebellion. If Marika provided the assassins but Ranni directed them to Godwyn specifically, both conspirators might have believed they were using the other. The result was catastrophic in ways neither might have fully anticipated. Godwyn's soulless body was interred at the Erdtree's roots in the deep-root depths, as the Prince of Death's cyst confirms. But without a soul, his flesh didn't rest. It began to grow, to corrupt, spreading like cancer through the Erdtree's root network. He became the Prince of Death, and from his spreading corruption came Deathroot, as the Deathroot description explains. From Deathroot emerged those who live in death, undead who couldn't die properly, trapped between life and true ending. These beings, described by Dee's dialogue as abominations, spread across the lands between wherever Erdtree roots ran deep. The Golden Order would hunt them mercilessly, seeing them as threats to the entire system of soul recycling. For Godwyn himself, the fate was arguably worse than death. The Golden Epitaph Sword's description reveals that a young boy, presumably his brother, prayed, "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." Godwyn was trapped in a state of perpetual decay, neither alive nor truly dead, conscious enough to suffer but unable to end. Ranni's death was more successful by her own measure. Her soul survived in the doll form she'd prepared. As we meet her, according to her dialogue, she was no longer bound by her Empyrean body, and the two fingers that had been assigned to her could no longer control her fate. She had slipped free of the Greater Will's direct influence. Though the price was high, she was dependent on others, limited in unexpected ways. Before the assassination, Ranni had taken precautions. The blasphemous claw description states she gave her brother Rykard this object on the night of the dire plot as a last resort foil, allowing Rykard to challenge Malekith the Black Blade. If everything went wrong, if Malekith discovered what had been done and came seeking revenge, Rykard could potentially fight him off and protect Ranni. This contingency was never needed, but it shows how carefully she planned. The news of Godwyn's death spread through the lands between like a plague. The most beloved demigod, the exemplar of everything right about the Golden Order, had been murdered. Assassins had penetrated the royal capital's defenses. The immortal had died. The certainty that had defined the Golden Age shattered in a single night. The two fingers had no immediate answers. According to Aenia's dialogue, they attempted to commune with the Greater Will, seeking guidance, but this communication would take thousands, if not tens of thousands of moons. The fingers entered a state of communion that would effectively last forever, leaving the lands between without clear divine guidance, for the first time since the Golden Order's founding. And then came Marika's reaction, as described in Marika's hammer. She took her hammer and shattered the Elden Ring. Whether this was grief at her son's death, or the culmination of centuries of planning, or some combination of both, the result was the same. The laws of reality broke. The great runes that had composed the ring scattered, each claiming a fragment of order, each becoming a source of power that could reshape local existence. The Erdtree sealed itself, impenetrable thorns growing around its base as seen in the game. The Greater Will, Furious at this betrayal, according to Aenia's dialogue, imprisoned Marika within the sealed Erdtree. Based on the opening cutscene and the final battle, her body was crucified on a rune arc, impaled, chained, unable to act, though unable to die. Radahn, her other self, attempted to repair what Marika had shattered. The hammer description notes he tried to repair the Elden Ring using the same hammer she'd used to break it, but his efforts were futile. The ring was too broken, the pieces were scattered too far, and Radahn himself was bound within Marika's imprisoned form, his desire to restore order at war with her apparent desire to see it broken forever. The shattering had begun. The Golden Age was over, and the demigods, suddenly possessing fragments of divine power in a world without clear divine authority, began to eye each other with ambition, wondering who among them would claim the Elden Throne and become the next god of a new order. Marika had destroyed her own empire, but based on everything we know about her origins, her treatment by the order she built, and her growing doubts, this might have been exactly what she wanted. The question is, did she know what would come next? Part 5. The Shattering War, when gods devoured each other. The period following the shattering became a war unlike any the lands between had seen, as the various sword monuments chronicle. It was a conflict where immortal demigods wielding fragments of reality itself fought for supremacy with no clear rules, no divine arbiter, no inevitable outcome. The great runes had scattered to different demigods, as their individual remembrances confirm. Each rune granted immense power, shaping reality around its bearer, allowing them to defy natural laws. The demigods who claimed these runes became shard-bearers, individuals of such might that conventional armies could barely slow them, let alone stop them. But possessing a great rune wasn't enough to become Elden Lord. According to the Two Fingers guidance through Enia, one needed to gather multiple great runes, penetrate the thorns sealing the Erdtree, and somehow resolve the situation with Marika's imprisoned form. This meant every shard-bearer was both immensely powerful and constantly threatened by the others. Morgott emerged from the shunning grounds and took control of Leyndell, as his boss arena location confirms. Despite his omen nature, despite being rejected by the very order he defended, he established himself as the capital's protector. His dialogue when fought shows he took the title Morgott the Grace Given, suggesting he believed he still held Marika's favor despite everything. When other demigods attempted to claim the capital and the Erdtree, Morgott repelled them. According to the sword monuments and his own monologue, he faced Radahn, Rykard, and others, driving them all back. His skill with a blade, shown in his boss fight, combined with his unshakable faith that the Golden Order must be preserved above all else. He called the other shard-bearers willful traitors all. In his cutscene dialogue, in his view, they were abandoning their duties, pursuing ambition rather than serving the Order. He saw himself as the only one still loyal, the only one still worthy, even though the Order had never accepted him. His psychology was deeply tragic, forever serving, forever denied, forever certain that his devotion would somehow be rewarded despite all evidence to the contrary. Godric, weakest of the demigods, attempted to flee as warfare erupted. Kenneth Haight's dialogue reveals that Godric hid himself amongst the womenfolk to flee the capital, disguising himself as a woman to escape the fighting. He retreated to Stormvile Castle in Limgrave with his great rune, as far from the real battles as he could manage. During the wars, according to the same dialogue, Godric hid from Radahn in his castle, refusing engagement with the stronger demigod. But then he made a catastrophic mistake. He insulted Malenia when she and her clean-rot knights passed through Limgrave. Then, lost to her in battle, only to lick her boots rather than die like a man. The battle was so one-sided it barely counted as combat. Malenia granted him mercy, more out of indifference than kindness, and continued on her way. After this humiliation, Godric retreated fully into grafting, as his boss form shows. If he couldn't match the other demigods naturally, he would build himself into something stronger by literally attaching limbs and body parts from Tarnished and other warriors to his body. Rykard's transformation marked perhaps the most extreme response to the Shattering. Tanith's dialogue reveals that Rykard, already opposing the Golden Order, made a decision that horrified even his followers. He fed himself to the god-devouring serpent on Mount Gelmire, as the serpent's remembrance describes. His body merged with the creature, his consciousness persisting within its massive form, creating a blasphemous union where he could literally devour other beings and absorb their power. The remembrance states he could invite his recusants to join him in the serpent's form, to become part of something greater than themselves. According to Tanith, this act drove away most of Rykard's original forces. His soldiers could accept rebellion, but becoming one with a world-devouring beast was too far. Yet Rykard maintained his brother Radahn's portrait in Volcano Manor, visible in the game, suggesting some family feeling persisted even in his monstrous form. Miquella and Malenia pursued their own path during the Shattering. Based on the Erdtree and Elphael locations, Miquella had entered the Erdtree itself, placing himself in a cocoon where he hoped to finally grow beyond his curse. Malenia, as the Cleanrot Knight armor states, needed to protect the tree during this vulnerable period. But Malenia didn't simply stay to guard. She led her Cleanrot Knights, described in their armor as warriors who vowed to serve Malenia, despite the inevitable putrefaction that would follow, on a campaign south from the Erdtree. The sword monuments chronicle multiple battles. She defeated Godric humiliatingly, as we've discussed. By all accounts recorded in these monuments, she remained undefeated, her blade technique perfected beyond any warrior's ability to match. The purpose of this campaign remains somewhat ambiguous in the base game, but the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion suggests she was hunting Radahn specifically, for reasons tied to a vow Miquella had made with the general long ago. Radahn, meanwhile, established himself as the strongest shard-bearer through sheer martial might, as multiple characters' dialogue confirms. His conquest of the stars continued even during the Shattering. His Redmane Knights, wearing armor bearing his insignia, fought with unwavering loyalty. His castle in Caelid became a fortress no conventional force could breach. According to the sword monuments, he attempted to challenge Godric, but found the weaker demigod had simply hidden. So when word came that Malenia herself was marching toward Caelid, Radahn prepared to face the only warrior who might actually match him. The Battle of Aeonia would become the most significant military engagement of the entire Shattering, the point where the war reached its horrific crescendo and then suddenly, catastrophically, ended. The Cleanrot Knight armor tells us that Malenia's forces met Radahn's armies in the Caelid wilds. Casualties on both sides were staggering. The Cleanrot Knights were fewer, but each was a master warrior. The Redmane Knights were vast in number, skilled in gravitational combat taught by their general. Finally, as the remembrance of the Rot goddess describes, Malenia and Radahn met directly. The two most powerful warriors in the lands between, neither ever defeated, fought in single combat. The duel was evenly matched, as the cinematic trailer shows. Neither could gain lasting advantage. And then, as the Scarlet Aeonia incantation description reveals, Malenia released her Scarlet Rot. The incantation's text states, Malenia's first bloom, when she fought Radahn. She had been using an unalloyed gold needle to suppress her rot, as Millicent's questline confirms. In the heat of battle, she either deliberately removed this needle or it shattered. The scarlet Aeonia bloomed, a massive flower of rot visible across the region. As the incantation description continues, in the Caelid wilds, Malenia, blade of Miquella, fought Radahn to a standstill. In a battle of pure instinct, she unleashed the scarlet Aeonia. The flower consumed Cleanrot and Redmane knights alike. It infected Radahn, beginning the process of destroying his mind and body. It corrupted the land itself, transforming the verdant Caelid into the scarlet wasteland we explore in the game. According to Millicent's questline, Malenia collapsed unconscious after this. Her knight Finlay, showing loyalty beyond reason, carried her all the way back to the Erdtree, as the Finlay's ashes description confirms. A spirit that has not given up on life even in death. Finlay led the Cleanrot Knights, and following a bitter battle against Radahn in the Caelid wilds, carried the slumbering demigod Malenia all the way back to the Erdtree, a long and treacherous journey that requires true determination. Radahn survived the initial blast, but was not intact. The scarlet rot began eating away at his body, as visible in his boss fight. His feet rotted off, his mind deteriorated, the proud general becoming a feral beast that stalks Caelid, consuming corpses to sustain himself, as Geren's dialogue describes. The Battle of Aeonia ended in mutual defeat, as Gideon Ofnir's dialogue notes. Neither achieved their objectives. Both were removed from the Shattering's conflicts, one in a coma at the Erdtree, the other reduced to madness in Caelid. Their armies were decimated. The land itself was destroyed. With these two most powerful shard-bearers effectively removed from play, the war ground to a halt, not because anyone won, but because no one left could push for victory. Morgott held Lindel, but couldn't expand beyond it. Godric cowered in Stormvale. Rykard consumed in his manor. Ranni had discarded her great rune entirely, as her dialogue reveals. Morg had retreated to Morgwyn Palace with a kidnapped Miquella. As we discover, the lands between descended into stalemate and decay. Without the Elden Ring, without clear divine guidance, without the possibility of true death for the demigods, the war simply persisted. Years passed. Decades. The exact time frame is never specified, but based on environmental decay, possibly centuries. And in this stagnation, according to the opening narration, the greater will turned its attention to those who had been exiled long ago. Grace began to return to the Tarnished, beckoning them home, calling them back to the lands between to either restore the order or replace it with something new. Because if the demigods had failed, if Marika's bloodline couldn't resolve what she'd broken, then perhaps the solution lay with those who had been cast out, who had grown strong through adversity, who had no stake in preserving the old order. Perhaps it was time for the Tarnished to return. Can't. Part 6. The Return of Grace and the Tarnished's Journey. Grace returned as golden light appearing where there had been none for generations, as the opening cutscene describes. Across the lands beyond the fog, wherever the Tarnished had been exiled, they began to see it again. The guiding light of the Erdtree, lost for so long, suddenly beckoning them home. The Tarnished, as the Tarnished's ring description explains, were descendants of those warriors Marika had stripped of grace and banished. For generations they had lived in distant lands, dying and staying dead without the Erdtree's recycling of souls, growing strong through hardship as Marika's echoed words suggest she intended. But grace didn't return to all Tarnished equally. Some saw it clearly, unmistakable. Others, as Vara's dialogue notes, saw nothing and remained graceless. The selection seemed almost random, but perhaps the Erdtree or Marika or some other power was choosing specific individuals for specific purposes. Among those called was a Tarnished of no renown, no particular skill or destiny, as the narrator states, and one other, whom grace would again bless, a tarnished of no renown. This would become the player character, but they began with nothing to distinguish them from any other called tarnished, except one crucial detail: they were maidenless. The tarnished arrived at the Chapel of Anticipation, as the starting location confirms, a structure overlooking the foggy approach to the lands between. Inside lay a corpse. A finger maiden slumped against a wall, long dead, unable to serve. Finger maidens were crucial, as Var's mocking dialogue explains. These women, serving the two fingers, could turn runes into strength, transforming accumulated power into enhanced abilities. Without a maiden, a tarnished was lost, unable to grow stronger, unable to progress. Then came the grafted scion, dropping into the chapel as a trial. This enemy was overwhelming by design, meant to kill starting tarnished and transport them to the stranded graveyard below. After reaching a site of grace, Malenia appeared, manifesting from golden light as her cutscene shows. She spoke of having observed the tarnished, of Torrent having chosen them. She offered an accord, as her dialogue states. She would play the role of a finger maiden, allowing the tarnished to convert runes into strength. In exchange, the tarnished would take her to the foot of the Erdtree. This wasn't really a choice. Without Malenia, the tarnished couldn't level up, couldn't progress. But there were hints from the beginning that Malenia was more than she appeared, as her dialogue reveals. She was burned and bodiless, existing as a spirit. She could appear and disappear at sites of grace. She mentioned her mother being inside the Erdtree, strongly suggesting that Mother was Marika herself, making Malenia yet another of the goddess's children, one never mentioned by other demigods. Malenia provided the spectral steed whistle, allowing the tarnished to call Torrent. She explained that Torrent had chosen the tarnished specifically, as her dialogue notes, suggesting this particular warrior had some quality that made them right for whatever was coming. Following Grace's guidance led to Limgrave, where Godric ruled from Stormvile Castle. This was the lands between's edge, the first step toward Leyndell and the Erdtree. Grace marked the path forward through golden rays, as visible in gameplay. The Tarnished was advised to seek shard-bearers and claim their great runes, as Malenia's dialogue explains. 2 great runes would grant an audience with the 2 fingers. Multiple runes would eventually allow passage through the Erdtree's thorns. The goal seemed clear: gather power, defeat the demigods, restore the ring, become Elden Lord. But the path was anything but simple. The lands between were vast, filled with challenges, secrets, and evidence of the Shattering's consequences everywhere. Early in the journey, as her dialogue triggers, Malenia extended an invitation to the Round Table Hold, described as a gathering place for Tarnished. Here, the Tarnished met others pursuing the same goal. Sir Gideon Ofnir, who accumulated knowledge. Nephili Lu, a warrior. D, who hunted those who live in death. Rogia, researching the Night of Black Knives. Fia, offering comfort while hiding her own agenda. Corin, a fundamentalist who believed the order could be perfected. The 2 fingers maintained presence there, tended by Enya. But their communication was so slow and cryptic, as Enya's dialogue admits, that their usefulness was questionable. They had entered communion with the greater will that could take thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. The Tarnished began gathering great runes. Godric in Stormvile was typically first, being weakest and closest. His boss fight, despite his grafted form and multiple weapons, resulted in his defeat. His final words spoke of his bloodline and determination to prove himself worthy. With Godric's great rune claimed, the path led onward to Liurnia, to Raya Lucaria, where Rennala resided, lost in grief, Her boss fight, unique in that she didn't truly die but was released from the Amber Egg's grip, yielded her great rune of rebirth. The journey continued through various regions, Caelid's scarlet rot wastes, the Altus Plateau, eventually toward Leyndell itself. Each region revealed more complexity, more evidence that simply restoring the Golden Order might not be the answer the lands between needed. Part 7. Leyndell, the Sealed Erdtree, and Morgoth's Last Stand. The approach to Leyndell required significant power, as the game's progression confirms. The outer walls were heavily defended. Access essentially required multiple great runes. The city itself, despite scars from the Shattering, remained magnificent with golden architecture reaching toward the Erdtree. Morgoth had defended this city throughout the Shattering, as sword monuments confirm. The path through Leyndell led upward toward the Elden Throne. In the sewers below lay the subterranean shunning grounds where omens were imprisoned, where Morgoth and Mog had been sealed as children. Deeper still, beneath the shunning grounds, lay the Cathedral of the Forsaken and the Three Fingers prison. This forbidden place offered a dark alternative, as Hyetta's dialogue explains. Accept the frenzied flame, burn everything away, return all to the one great. Accepting this would lock the Tarnished into becoming Lord of Frenzied Flame. At the city's peak, before the Erdtree's entrance, stood Morgoth. His cutscene speech named the other shard-bearers with contempt. Godric the Golden, the twin prodigies Miquella and Malenia, General Radahn, Praetor Rykard, Lunar Princess Ranni. Willful traitors all. Yet Morgoth himself was an omen, marked by the order he defended. The battle tested everything the Tarnished had learned, with Morgoth wielding cursed weapons and holy power. His defeat was earned through skill, not simple power. When Morgoth fell, his final words spoke of protecting the Erdtree even from those who would restore the ring, suggesting he understood something others didn't. His great rune was claimed, but the path to the Erdtree remained sealed by impenetrable thorns. Malenia reappeared with a revelation, as her dialogue at the Forge Site of Grace explains. She had ascertained her purpose. She could burn the Erdtree, kindling the flame needed to destroy the thorns, but she would need to reach the flame of ruin at the Forge of the Giants. This posed a terrible choice. The thorns were impenetrable. The Two Fingers and Greater Will would never allow the Erdtree to burn, as Ennia's dialogue confirms. But without burning it, the Tarnished couldn't progress. There was an alternative. If the frenzied flame had been accepted, the Tarnished could burn the tree themselves, as Malenia's warning dialogue explains. This would save her, but lock the ending to Lord of Frenzied Flame. Assuming the normal path, the journey led to the mountain tops, to the forge where the fire giant still lived, cursed to guard the flame for eternity. Defeating this massive enemy opened the path to the forge. At the forge, as the cutscene shows, Malenia performed her final act. She took the Tarnished's hand, rendered them unconscious, and became kindling. The flame of ruin ignited. The Erdtree began to burn. The thorns withered away. But the Tarnished didn't wake in Leyndell. Instead, they found themselves in crumbling Farum Azula, a storm-racked ruin floating beyond normal space and time, as the location's description suggests. This place existed outside the regular world, a fragment from the age when dragons ruled. Here resided Malekith, still bearing the rune of death sealed within his black blade. The journey through Farum Azula revealed ancient architecture and Dragon Lord Placidusax, the Elden Lord of a previous age whose god had fled, leaving it waiting eternally for a return that would never come. Malekith's boss dialogue spoke of his loyalty to Marika and determination to protect death. The battle was fierce, with Malekith wielding destined death itself in attacks that could reduce maximum health. His defeat meant death was unbound, could return to the world, could finally end the stagnation of immortality. With Malekith fallen, the Tarnished was transported back to Leyndell, now transformed. The burning of the Erdtree had turned the city to ash. The golden hue had faded to grey. The capital was dying, beginning its slow collapse. The path to the Erdtree's interior was now open. The Tarnished entered, passing through the scorched trunk, descending to where the Elden Ring resided. There stood Queen Marika's form, crucified on a rune ark, impaled, her body hosting both herself and Radahn. As the Tarnished approached, as the cutscene shows, Marika's hair turned red. Radahn took control, pulled Marika's hammer from beside the shattered ring, and attacked. This was the final defense, the last guardian, whether by choice or compulsion. The battle with Radahn tested every skill developed throughout the journey. He wielded holy power and physical might, his shockwave attacks requiring careful timing, his combos leaving little room for healing. When Radahn finally fell, as the transition cutscene shows, the Elden Ring within Marika's form reacted. The Elden Beast emerged, that living embodiment of order itself, the greater will's direct vision manifested. It was massive, alien, beautiful in a cold way, wielding cosmic power. This wasn't a demigod pursuing ambition or a warrior defending a kingdom. This was order incarnate fighting to preserve itself. Victory over the Elden Beast, as challenging as it was, marked the end of combat. But it wasn't the end of choice. Part 8. Multiple Destinies. 6 Ways to Reshape Reality. Standing in that liminal space where Marika's shattered form rested, the Tarnished faced the most important decision. What to do with this power? How to reshape the lands between? What vision of order to impose, or whether to reject order entirely? The endings available depended on actions throughout the journey, on quest lines completed and items gathered. Each represented a different philosophy, a different answer to what had gone wrong and how to fix it. The Age of Fracture was the default ending, requiring no special quests. Simply touch Marika's broken body and choose to mend the Elden Ring, as the prompt states. The Tarnished would become Elden Lord, sitting on the throne with Marika's head resting in their lap. The ring repaired, but fundamentally unchanged, as the ending cutscene shows. This represented restoration of the Golden Order to something approximating its previous state. But it meant returning to the same system that had led to stagnation, to the rejection of omens, to all the problems that caused it to shatter originally. Nothing would truly change. The cycle would likely begin again. The Age of Order required completing Brother Corhin and Goldmask's quest line to obtain the Mending Rune of Perfect Order. Goldmask's research, as his gesture and Corhin's dialogue explain, concluded that the flaw in the Golden Order stemmed from the fickleness of the gods themselves, who were no better than men. Using this mending rune would create an order based on unbreakable cosmic law, removing potential for divine caprice. The gods would still exist, but would be bound by absolute rules, unable to act on whims. This solved the problem of divine failure by removing divine agency, but also removed possibility for growth or adaptation. The Age of the Duskborn required completing Fia's quest line and obtaining the mending rune of the Death Prince. Fia's dialogue throughout her quest reveals she sought to embrace those who live in death rather than hunt them as abominations. This ending would restore the cycle of life and death to something more natural, as the ending cutscene with its dark coloration suggests, allowing people to truly die rather than being eternally recycled. It acknowledged death as necessary rather than a flaw, but it also meant accepting Godwyn's corruption and allowing the boundaries between life and death to blur. The blessing of despair required completing the loathsome Dung-Eater's quest line and collecting his seedbed curses to obtain the mending rune of the Fell curse. His dialogue explains his belief. If everyone was cursed, if everyone bore horns and was rejected by grace, there would be no privileged class. This was perhaps the darkest ending, where every being would be born an omen, cursed from birth, as the ending cutscene's ominous red coloration suggests. It represented revenge against the Golden Order's exclusionary nature by making its rejection universal. Equality through universal suffering. The Age of Stars required completing Ranni's full quest line as detailed through her, Aege's, and Blythe's dialogues. After defeating the Elden Beast, instead of touching Marika's statue, summon Ranni at her blue summon sign that appears on the ground. Ranni's vision, as her ending dialogue explains, was of an order of stars and moon kept at a 1,000-year voyage distance from the lands between. No longer would divine beings rule directly. No longer would outer gods meddle constantly. The world would be left to find its own path, without certainty of faith, but also without oppression of divine mandate. The Age of Stars represented liberation through abandonment, as the ending cutscene beautifully shows with Ranni and the Tarnished leaving together. It freed the lands between from the Greater Will's control, but left enormous uncertainty about what would happen without any order at all. Lord of Frenzied Flame required accepting the Frenzied Flame from the three fingers in the Cathedral of the Forsaken. This ending overrode all others, locked in from the moment the flame was accepted, unless Miquella's needle was used in Dragon Lord Placidusax's arena to suppress it. If the Frenzied Flame remained, as Ennia's horrified dialogue notes, only one ending was possible. The Tarnished would become a vessel for Yellow Flame, as the dramatic ending cutscene shows, burning the Erdtree and everything beyond. The goal was to return everything to the One Great, to undo the Greater Will's original fracturing. In this ending, if Malenia hadn't been sacrificed at the Forge, she appears after the credits with her closed eye now open, revealing what appears to be destined death. She vows to hunt down the Lord of Frenzied Flame, as her dialogue states, suggesting that even in the most destructive ending, hope remained that someone might stop the madness. Each ending represented a different answer to fundamental questions. None were clearly right or wrong. Each had philosophical merit and practical consequences. The Age of Fracture restored what had been. The Age of Order sought perfection through rigid law. The Age of the Duskborn embraced death as natural. The blessing of despair spread suffering universally. The Age of Stars rejected divine rule entirely, and the Lord of Frenzied Flame burned everything to start over. Part 9. The Deeper Truth, Marika's centuries-long conspiracy. Now that we've seen the complete story, we can return to that opening question with the evidence laid out before us. And when you look at all the pieces together, a pattern emerges that's impossible to ignore. Let me be clear. What follows is interpretation based on evidence from the game, not explicitly confirmed lore. But it's an interpretation that makes sense of contradictions that otherwise seem random. Consider this carefully. Marika came from the shaman village, confirmed by Shadow of the Erdtree. Her people were used in horrific jar experiments by the Hornsent, as the Golden Braid and environmental storytelling reveal. She was one of the few survivors of systematic persecution that could reasonably be called genocide. She rose to godhood and immediately began acting in ways that suggest deep planning. Evidence point 1. The X of the Tarnished. Marika stripped Godfrey and his warriors of grace and exilted them, as the banished knight armor confirms. Malenia recounts Marika's words that suggest she intended for them to return one day when grace beckoned them. This implies advanced planning for a future where outside challenges would be needed. Why exile your most loyal warriors at the height of your power unless you were preparing for a future where you'd need forces outside the system? Evidence point 2. Hugh's promise. Hugh's dialogue explicitly states his task is to create a weapon to kill a god, and calls this his promise to Queen Marika. She imprisoned him in the Round Table Hold for this specific purpose. When did she make this promise? Why would a loyal goddess need a god-slaying weapon unless she planned to use it against the Elden Beast? Evidence point 3. The Black Knife connection. The Black Knife armor states the assassins were rumored to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself. Ranni admits she orchestrated the Night of Black Knives and performed the ritual to imbue the daggers with death. But notice what Ranni never says, that she hired the assassins or chose Godwyn as the target. Here's what the evidence suggests might have happened. Marika provided access to the assassins. Ranni orchestrated the timing and ritual. Neither fully understood what the other was doing. Ranni needed someone to die at the exact moment she did to split the curse mark. Marika needed a trigger, a tragedy that would justify shattering the ring while appearing to be a grief-stricken mother. Godwyn, Marika's beloved son, became both their targets for different reasons. Evidence point 4. The Meter Revelation. Count Ymir's dialogue in Shadow of the Erdtree reveals that Meter, the Mother of Fingers, had been abandoned by the Greater Will. The two fingers had been acting without actual divine guidance for ages, improvising based on old instructions. This means the Golden Order was running on institutional inertia, not active divine will. Marika, as the vessel for the Elden Ring, would have been in the best position to realize this. She would have understood that she was enforcing rules the Greater Will might not even care about anymore, trapped as the face of an order built on outdated commands from an absent god. Evidence point 5. Radagon's repair attempt. Marika's hammer description notes that Marika shattered the Elden Ring, while Radahn tried to repair it, adding that, although they are the same being, they have fundamentally different ideals. This internal conflict wasn't madness. It was Marika's doubt versus Radagon's faith, her rebellion versus his loyalty, locked in the same imprisoned body. Evidence point 6. The pattern of questions. Malenia recounts Marika's words at the minor Erdtree church, where she declared her intention to search the depths of the Golden Order. Her echoes throughout the world show someone questioning the system she built. These weren't casual doubts. They were public declarations that she no longer believed in blind faith. Now consider the timeline this evidence suggests. Marika rises to power already doubting, already traumatized by what happened to her people. She builds the Golden Order because she has no choice. She's been selected as the Greater Will's vessel, but she begins planning from the start. She removes death from the ring, protecting herself while she works on a longer plan. She conquers the lands between using Godfrey, then exiles him and his warriors to grow strong in distant lands, preparing them to return when needed. She creates or splits into Radahn, giving herself a loyal aspect to maintain the Order's appearance, while her other self subverts it. She has children with both Godfrey and Radahn, creating demigods with different capabilities and loyalties, pieces on a board. She realizes at some point that the two fingers are abandoned, that the Greater Will isn't actually watching anymore, that she's trapped enforcing an order that serves no one. She begins making arrangements. Hugh gets his task. The Tarnished are positioned for eventual return. When the Night of Black Knives happens, whether she orchestrated it entirely or simply provided the means, Godwyn's death gives her the justification she needs. She shatters the Elden Ring, knowing this will trigger her imprisonment, but also knowing it will scatter the great runes, start the shattering, and eventually force the greater will to call back the Tarnished. Then she waits, imprisoned, unable to act directly, but watching as the demigods tear each other apart, as the Tarnished return and grow stronger, as Hugh perfects his god-slaying weapon, as someone eventually burns the Erdtree and fights through to challenge Radahn and the Elden Beast. She engineered a situation where she didn't need to do anything after shattering the ring. The pieces were positioned. The plan would unfold on its own. All that remained was waiting for a Tarnished strong enough to finish what she started. The final revelation. Here's what this interpretation suggests about your journey through the game. You weren't defying Marika. You were completing her plan. Every step you took, from gathering great runes to burning the Erdtree to killing the Elden Beast, was moving toward what she'd been planning for centuries. She needed someone outside the system, someone not bound by the Golden Order's ideology, someone who could do what she herself couldn't while imprisoned. She needed a Tarnished. And whether you chose to restore the Golden Order, replace it with something new, reject it entirely with Ranni, or burn everything as the Lord of Frenzied Flame, you still fulfilled her essential goal. You ended the Greater Will's direct control over the lands between. You killed the Elden Beast. You proved that gods could be challenged. The multiple endings aren't failures of her plan. They're evidence that she succeeded in creating genuine choice where none had existed before. Again, to be absolutely clear, this is interpretation, not confirmed canon. The game deliberately leaves Marika's true motives ambiguous. But this interpretation explains why. A loyal goddess would exile her best warriors, preparing for their return. She would create a god-slaying weapon to kill the Elden Beast. She would have close ties to the Black Knife assassins, providing the means. She would shatter the ring after Godwyn's death, the trigger for the plan. She would be at war with herself, Marika versus Radahn, doubt versus faith. The Greater Will would eventually call back the Tarnished, the final piece. It makes sense of contradictions that otherwise seem random. It gives Marika agency rather than madness. It transforms her from a tragic figure driven to destruction by grief into someone who spent centuries engineering the downfall of the decoded system that imprisoned her. And it means that the story of Elden Ring isn't about a Tarnished restoring a broken world. It's about a Tarnished completing the most elaborate rebellion in the history of the lands between. A conspiracy that began the moment a traumatized survivor of genocide was forced to become a goddess for a system she despised. Conclusion: the greatest trick a god ever pulled. We've journeyed from the fracturing of the One Great through the rise and fall of the Golden Order to 6 possible futures. We've seen how Marika, a survivor of genocide, became both tyrant and rebel. How the demigods, children of gods, were just as flawed and desperate as any mortal. How the Tarnished, exiled and returned, were given the power to reshape reality itself. But here's the final twist. The one that makes you want to go back and play the entire game again with new understanding. Every time you rested at a site of grace, you were sitting at Marika's altars. Every time Malenia appeared to level you up, she was using Marika's power, granted through their connection as mother and daughter. Every time grace guided you toward the next objective, you were following Marika's light, not the Greater Will's. Every echo of Marika's words that Malenia shared with you was another piece of the conspiracy being revealed. You were never alone on your journey. Marika was with you at every site of grace, watching through Malenia, guiding you toward the Erdtree, empowering you to do what she herself couldn't while imprisoned. The goddess who seemed absent was actually present at every single moment of your journey. And if you accepted the frenzied flame, if you chose to burn everything away and return all to the One Great, Malenia abandons you, calls you unfit, promises to deliver destined death. But think about what this means. Even in the most destructive ending, Even when you choose chaos over any kind of order, you're still ending the greater will's dominance. You're still destroying the system that imprisoned Marika. She wins either way. Whether you restore the Golden Order, perfect it, embrace death, curse everyone, leave with Ranni, or burn it all down, you accomplish her essential goal. You prove that gods can be challenged, that the Elden Beast can be killed, that the future isn't predetermined by cosmic forces beyond mortal understanding. The game's title takes on new meaning now. Elden Ring isn't just the name of the object you're trying to restore. It's the cycle, the ring of events that Marika set in motion. Exile, return, challenge, transformation. A ring that had to be shattered before it could be truly changed. Elden Ring's world is one of contradictions. Beautiful yet broken, eternal yet decaying, filled with gods who act like mortals and mortals aspiring to godhood. It's a place where order imposed suffering, where rebellion caused destruction, where even well-intentioned actions led to unintended consequences. But what makes this story so compelling is how it examines whether cycles of trauma and violence can ever truly be broken, or if they just repeat in new forms. Marika experienced oppression and built an oppressive empire. But then, perhaps she spent centuries engineering its downfall, using the very methods that had been used against her to ultimately create the possibility of something different. The story respects player intelligence by not providing easy answers. Every character, from the lowliest hollow to Queen Marika herself, acts from understandable motivations, even when those actions lead to catastrophe. The world doesn't have heroes and villains, but desperate people making impossible choices in circumstances that offered no good options. Your choice of ending becomes your answer to the questions the game poses. Can order ever be just? Can hierarchies exist without oppression? Can gods rule wisely, or does divine power inevitably corrupt? Can someone who suffered oppression create something better? Or are they doomed to perpetuate what they experienced? The Lands Between doesn't answer these questions definitively. Instead, it hands them to you and asks you to decide. And perhaps that's the most radical thing Marika accomplished. Not destroying the Golden Order, but creating the genuine possibility for choice about what would come after it. So here's what I want you to consider the next time you play Elden Ring. Every grace you rest at is Marika watching you. Every level Malenia grants is Marika empowering you. Every echo she shares is Marika revealing pieces of her plan. The goddess who seemed to have failed, who appeared to have gone mad and destroyed everything in grief, was actually succeeding in the most elaborate act of rebellion ever attempted against cosmic forces that believed themselves unchallengeable. You weren't restoring a broken world. You were finishing the conspiracy that began centuries before you were born, completing the plan of a goddess who knew that the only way to truly change the system was to destroy it from within, while making everyone believe you'd simply lost your mind. That's the real lore of Elden Ring. That's the story hidden in the spaces between what you're told and what actually happened. And once you see it, you can never see the game the same way again. If you've made it this far, thank you for joining me on this extensive exploration. I hope it's completely transformed how you see this world and given you reasons to return to the Lands Between with new understanding. If you enjoyed this deep dive, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more lore explorations. And remember, the next time you sit at a site of grace and see that golden light, you're not just resting. You're meeting with a goddess who's been waiting centuries for someone exactly like you to finish what she started. Sweet dreams, travelers, and may you find your worth in the waking world.